multi-platinum producer, engineer, guitarist, David Kalmusky. Drums are such a huge part of the Addiction studio sound. As I understand it, wasn't the tracking room designed around a drum kit?
Yeah, we worked with Chris Huston, who was an engineer on Led Zeppelin II and The Who Are You, and in his heyday in London, recorded a lot of records, and then got into being an architect a little later in his career and built some of the great rooms in Nashville that I loved working in, like the Big Boy Room at the Sound Kitchen in Franklin. And when Jonathan and I were sort of thinking about who to build the room with, we met with Chris once, and it was just, it was a no-brainer. Chris was really passionate, loved a lot of the same things. Who doesn't love Led Zeppelin II? And the big thing was to have a drum room that was not only Led Zeppelin II and big, and that we could smash and get a great live room drum sound out of, but it was diffused well enough so that if we turn the room mics and the ceiling mics off, the room didn't impart itself on close mics. So I've got such a diffused room out there, I can literally just by muting 2 or 3 microphones get a dry Eagles drum sound that sounds like we're in a tiny little carpeted room without setting up drapes, gobos, baffles, still in the middle of our tracking room. And if I open up those room mics, the vibe, completely changes. So while we were building the studio, we were actually listening to the room while it was under construction rather than just using a set of blueprints and finishing it. And Chris would come in and we'd find problems with the room. We've got a lot of windows out there, which is rare for a studio, so there's a lot of glass to room ratio that we had to deal with. And we ended up adding, a couple of rungs of custom diffusion and revising the room about 3 times based around what we were hearing from the drums reacting out there.
So what I heard was you auditioned a number of drum kits?
We did. We had 10 drum kits over here in 2 days. We pared it down. Well, we've got a few of our favorite kits for this room now. And then we're in Nashville. We're lucky to host some of the greatest drummers in the world and all of their drums, So I'll strike the house kit, and we'll have, we've recorded some of the great drummers in the world. Even a lot of the New York drummers will come by.
David, I've been enthralled by your drum miking configuration, not just aesthetically, but sonically. And I've had the opportunity to show your kit to a lot of other artists and engineers that are just looking for some other ideas. In fact, I sent a picture of your kit to Larry Crane at Tape-Op, and he came back with one word in all caps: elegant. How did you come up with that drum miking configuration? It's cool, it's all triad orbit, but how did you create that particular configuration?
We started with the O2s, and it was just pretty obvious that we could get the overhead and something below, and naturally what's below it is a tom. So, we've got our overheads also miking a tom. I've got snare top and bottom on one stand that also, I think, does the hi-hat. Kick in and out is easy to fit on a single mic, and there's no counterbalance arms, so the imprint of our drum kit, fully mic'd, used to be almost twice as much room space and imprint with the counterweights and stuff. Obviously the Starbird has all of that, but that can go all the way up to our ceiling. It can wheel immediately over to the other drum kit that's always set up in the corner of the room, and I leave that as sort of a live utility mic that's just always up in the room. The Starbird with that microphone never gets striked, never gets put away. It's always up, and it's completely mobile in the room.
How does the modularity of triad orbit help you achieve that?
It just basically, if I can get within any proximity of a source, there's an arm, an extension, a ball joint, there's always something that will get me there. It'll achieve it. So I don't have to trial by error, strike the bass stands a couple of times to try something out. I can conceptualize it, get things relatively close, and then reach into all the accessories to complete the task, and it just always works.
So was it pretty easy to do that? Was there any training provided by Triad Orbit, or was it pretty much intuitive?
Well, the Triad Orbit guys came and worked with us for a while and helped us understand the versatility of the systems, and I think we came up with it together, honestly. Herschel and Marty in the very first run of the very first Triad Orbit stuff, came over and we spent an afternoon together and tried a lot of different scenarios and you know, process of elimination. It all just seemed to work, and it's literally been up and active for, I'm not even sure how many years now. It's probably been 8 years that we've had this kit mic'd up very, very similarly. And I mean, I can just quickly drop and just hang all of the arms and move the kit out and put a completely different drummer and a completely different drum kit in, and then just bring the arms all sort of back into place. Unless I don't have a left-handed drummer or something really drastic, you know, this configuration generally works about 90% of the time, regardless of what I'm doing.
Nice. You said you've been an early adopter, and I think you said you had it for about 8 years. So how have things changed for you with regard to workflow improvement?
We started with the drums, and then we added some basses and some clamps and some arms secretly around the studio and all of the other rooms. Triad Orbit completely infested my vocal booth, and so now I have like a Dynamount robot with like about 7 or 8 microphones and headphones and a vocal microphone and an iPad for Zoom and communication in a vocal booth that I never would have dreamt about putting a 412 cabinet in there and using it for a multi-purpose room. It's not big enough, but with the Triad Orbit, stand system, that's all on one stand. So it's become a multi-purpose room. It's got us on a wired connection. It kept us going through COVID. We actually did the Carrie Underwood record this year, all, Carrie with Greg Wells on an iPad in LA, Carrie and I here in Nashville, and sang the whole record in the vocal booth on the Triad Orbit's stand system. You guys, every time you show up, there's new clamps for new devices, and it's always just been on a great trajectory, and when we see something, we adopt it, and we've evolved, and you'll find some Triad Orbit ecosystems in pretty much every corner of the studio, so I would just say keep going. Where there's something being held into place, I would encourage Triad Orbit to figure out a way to get it on on one of their pins. I love the clamps. I think that they can just go anywhere, and I can put an arm on anything, whether it's a piece of wood on a windowsill or whether it's another piece of hardware. The clamps are a really quick, easy go-to to just mic something that shows up in an odd place. Reliability is spot on, I think that it went through a lot of different changes, and I'm loving the new product. And the one thing I will say about Triad Orbit is that I work with a lot of manufacturers, I work with a lot of technologists, and most of the time, by the time I have some feedback, it's a little bit too late. The R&D needs to be recouped on a product line that's already been manufactured and delivered. And the one thing I will say about Triad Orbit is that they came into the studio community very early with some very early prototypes, and we beat on them and we abused them and we broke them. And you guys went back to the drawing board and you changed alloys and you continued to take feedback and would actually reach out, and I felt like Triad Orbit was really listening to us and our needs, and consistently. And so after all of those revisions, this product has become better and better, and I can rely on it. I've got some rare RCA microphones from 1938 that I'm completely comfortable putting on a Triad Orbit stand right now. Wouldn't have done that if somebody handed me something that wasn't tried and tested. So I wasn't initially going there on the first round, but now that it's been in the studio long enough, anything that we have, we're just clamping onto the system and putting it up.